Good evening, night travelers, and welcome to Midnight Frequency Radio. I'm your host, Carl Richardson, coming to you from the Ozark foothills of northeast Arkansas. Tonight, we're exploring a mystery that reaches from the halls of the White House to the farthest edges of human consciousness. For generations, Americans have wondered what their president knew about UFOs. Did they receive briefings? Were they given access to the truth, or were they, like the rest of us, searching for the answers hidden behind layers of secrecy and compartmentalization? Our guest tonight has spent more than 40 years pursuing these questions. Grant Cameron is one of the most respected and influential researchers in the UFO field. His journey began in 1975 during the famous Charlie Red Star sightings in Manitoba, Canada, one of the largest UFO waves in North American history. What started as an investigation into unexplained objects in the sky eventually became a lifetime quest for understanding the deeper nature of the phenomenon itself. Grant became internationally known through his groundbreaking presidential UFO research. He has made numerous research trips to the U.S. National Archives and presidential libraries. He has examined documents, witness testimony, Freedom of Information release, and insider accounts related to what American presidents may have known about UFOs and government secrecy surrounding the phenomenon. His work helped uncover thousands of pages of Clinton-era UFO-related documents and established him as one of the foremost authorities on presidential involvement in the UFO mystery. But over the years, Grant discovered that the mystery might be far bigger than secret government programs or hidden files. His research led him into the study of consciousness, paranormal experiences, creativity, inspiration, near-death experiences, physical phenomenon, and what he believed may be deeper connection between human consciousness and UFO phenomenon itself. Today he explores the possibility that understanding consciousness may be the key to understanding UFOs. So tonight we'll ask the big question: what did Presidents Carter, Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Obama, and Trump really know? Have disclosure efforts been quietly taking place behind the scenes for decades? Is there a hidden structure controlling access to UFO information? And could the answer to the UFO mystery lie not in outer space, but within consciousness itself? We'll be right back with Mr. Cameron right after this.
I knew I was stuck at this kid's house for the night. I decided to just go to sleep and get the night over with. But those guys came into the bedroom and got into a massive pillow fight. Let me tell you, it's not easy falling asleep when a sweaty little kid falls on you every 5 seconds. Even after the lights went out, Raleigh and his friends stayed up. A bunch of them snuck up on me to try and pull a hand in a bowl of warm water trick. Well, that was enough for me. I went downstairs to sleep in the basement even though it was pitch black. I left my sleeping bag upstairs and that was a mistake, because it was freezing. I think it was probably the longest night of my life. When the sun came up this morning, I found out the reason it was so cold. I was sleeping right by the sliding glass door, and some fool had gone and left it open overnight. That really stunk, because if I knew there was a way to escape last night, I definitely would have taken it. To read more about the sleepover, check out Diary of a Wimpy Kid, The Last Straw by Jeff Kinney. Explore new worlds and check out more cool books at your local library, and visit read.gov. Brought to you by the Library of Congress and the Ad Council.
Picking up the pieces of my sweet shattered dream, I wonder how the old folks are tonight. Her name was Anne, and I'll be damned if I recall her face. She left me now knowing what to do.
Coming to you at the speed of light in the darkness, this is Midnight Frequency Radio with Carl Richardson. Now, here's Carl.
Here I am, and we're with Grant Cameron this evening. Mr. Cameron, welcome to Midnight Frequency Radio.
Well, Carl, thank you for having me on. I appreciate your interest in what I'm doing.
I'm going to start out in what took place in 75 with the Charlie Red Star situation that sparked your interest in this phenomenon.
Okay, basically what happened was there was a small town called Carmen, Manitoba, which is just above North Dakota. It's about maybe 30 miles from the border. There was a bunch of sightings being reported there. I had no interest in UFOs. I was kind of interested in paranormal phenomena, but no interest in UFOs. I was going to university at the time, didn't know what I was going to do with the university stuff I was learning. And I heard about this thing, and I said to my friend, I said, instead of driving around the city, let's go out and see what everybody's looking at. Because what had happened was the local TV studio had actually captured this thing jumping off the ground, and it jumped off the ground, almost like the Nimitz story, if you're familiar with the Nimitz story. It went from 80,000 feet down to sea level in 7/8 of a second. This jumped from the ground to about 5,000 feet in the air in much less than that. It would be maybe a fifth of a second, something like that. And anyway, they caught this thing on film jumping off the ground, and it was a big deal in the city. And I said to my friend earlier, I said, let's go. And for 3 months, we didn't go. And because none of us had any interest in it. And then this TV studio got the film. And that's why I said to my friend, I said, come on, let's go see what they're looking at. And I always describe it as buying the lottery ticket. You buy a lottery ticket and you know there's a chance you can win, but you're not going to win. And so we went out there and I didn't think I'd ever see anything. And we drove around for an hour, didn't see anything. And after an hour, my friend said, okay, we'll drive back into Carmen one more time if we don't see anything. Let's go home. I said, well, okay, fantastic. It's been a total waste of time. And I said, exactly. I knew we wouldn't see anything. We turned the car to go back in, and this thing appeared from the left to the right. And nobody in the car said, is that it? I wonder if, is that what they're looking at? Is that what everybody's talking about? Everybody just went, there it is. It was just so bizarre. And it came from the left to the right, flew right in front of the car. It was red plasma. It looked like it was alive. It was beating like a heart. It was slowly beating and it was bobbing up and down, moving very slow, maybe 30, 40 miles an hour at the most. And I was just blown away by this. I couldn't believe it. I was getting out of the car. It was going in behind these school buses, and I was trying to run across this parking lot so I could see this thing when it got in behind the school buses. And I remember it was just sort of flying, it just pulsing away, and it was just flying along, and it just sort of flew away. Dragged all my friends out there 2 nights later, and that night it came. All my friends went home. They said, "Okay, we're going home. It's a waste. We're not going to see." I said, "No, you got to see this. This is a change your life if you see this." They all went home. About 15 minutes later, this thing came, but it was different than the first night. It was flashing. It looked like a flash cube jumping around in the sky. It was going about 8 inches the field of vision, so it was jumping all over the sky. And then these kids, we had taken these kids out, and they said, "Is that it?" And I said, I guess so. It didn't look like what I'd seen the first night. But as it got closer, the flashes got closer together, and then eventually it was the same object I'd seen the first night, except it had a green glow on the bottom of it. And I remember as it was flying away, I thought, wow, this is like an extraterrestrial from another planet. And I just felt so lucky, honored that I was, had lived to be able to see something like this. But as it was flying away, then I went, what's it doing? It's not doing anything. And that has bothered me for 51 years. That's my bottom line. I was a chess player when I was very young. I was pretty good at it. And to me, it's a chess game. It's I got to figure this thing out. I really don't care to see another UFO. If I live, 100 years, I couldn't care less. I'm not interested. I know this phenomenon exists. I'm just trying to figure out what it was. And most importantly, what happened the second night is what's it doing? It's not doing anything. It's just flying along. And you'll see that if you look at the modern UFO phenomena, that's what you'll see. The phenomena is just things flying around. No, they haven't landed for 30 years. There has not been a ground trace for 30 years. So they don't land. They just sort of fly around. And when people have UFO sightings, I always say to them, so what is it doing? Wasn't doing anything. And I said, well, did it appear? Yeah, it just appeared and it was there. Do you think it knew you saw it? Yeah, I think so. And it's this whole idea is I've come up with this theory that I was just actually working on that got me late to your show here. Working on this theory. Jacques Vallée calls it this control thing, and I call it the theory of wow. It's the same thing. That what we're dealing with is a paranormal phenomena which isn't particularly UFO. It's a phenomena that is doing weird stuff. I call it the theory of wow. It just wants you to go wow what the heck did I just see? Or how did that cattle get mutilated? How did that crop circle go down? All these weird things it's doing, leaving handprints on people, on windows, on just the most bizarre things you could possibly think of, or Skinwalker Ranch, just a million bizarre things. And that's what they want. They want you to realize the world is not the way you think it is. The world is much more advanced, much more conscious based than material based. And so that's where I sort of am today. I've sort of done this trip where I was lucky enough to see a UFO, and then I was lucky enough to have a download experience in 2012, watching Colin Andrews give a lecture in Laughlin, Nevada, that sort of awakened me to the fact that there's a consciousness factor to this thing. And it was told to me in my head. It came with absolute certainty. It said this has to do with consciousness. And that was the answer to that question in 1975. What's it doing? And it's the whole thing is tied into consciousness.
Why do you think the Charlie Red Star case remains relatively unknown compared to some of the other cases?
Because I didn't advertise it. I was the only one that was really sort of heavily investigating it. Most of the people in the town would rather not have had their names or talk. None of them wanted to talk about it. It was a small town, a farm town, and it was the one family that had had the most bizarre sightings. They would tell me stories where they'd go into the post office and people turn around and walk away. It was just like we don't want their names were the Lehmans, and we don't want to be the Lehmans. We don't want to get ostracized by everybody knew how ridiculing it was in 1975 to see a UFO. And more importantly, people don't realize if you haven't been around that long, is that in 1975, if you saw a UFO, you were crazy. If you saw more than one UFO, you were a total liar and crazy because it was a random event. You didn't get to see UFOs over and over again. We didn't know this thing about abductions and people are experiencers and they have, encounters their whole life. We didn't know any of that in 75. It was just basically random sightings. So I wrote the manuscript and I remember I sent it around to various people in about 1977. I thought, man, this is the most amazing manuscript. I'm going to sell a million copies. We're going to solve the UFO problem here. I've interviewed all these people in town and I've got this all documented and stuff. And nobody would publish it. And the local publisher, and I lived in a big city, the local publisher said, Mr. Cameron, you may believe in this kind of stuff. Count me among the unbelievers. I went, what? Are you kidding me? And that was it. I just to put the manuscript away, and I didn't even remember I wrote the manuscript, but my sister gave it back to me about 25 years later. She said, "Oh, I remember you wrote this," and I looked at it. I thought, "Wow, I remember I wrote maybe a chapter or something, but I don't remember writing a book." And I looked at it and I go, "Holy cow!" So then a publisher in Toronto actually published the thing, and but it was 40 years down the road. And so it didn't get the advertising that other things got, even though it had tremendous amount of bizarre sightings and we had lots of photographs and stuff like that. And we had the nuclear connection, which I didn't discover again until probably 45 years in. And that was that we always wondered why did it come to Carmen? Because Carmen was this little tiny town, was in the middle of nowhere, 2,000 people, farming community, no military, no industrial thing, nothing that would attract a UFO. And I remember I was talking to the guy that owned the airport there, and I said, "Bob, why did they come here? I can't never figured that out. Why they come to Carmen? Didn't make any sense." And he said, "You know why they're here?" And I said, "No, I don't. I don't know why they're here." He said, "I told you in 1975 why they're here. You know why they're here." And I said, "Bob, it's been like years. I have no idea why they're here." He said, "The missile silos. I told you." And what happened that's it made total sense because I lived north of North Dakota. North Dakota in 1975 had 300 nuclear missile silos. It had the Grand Forks, which had 150 missile silos, and the Minot, which is still active, 150 missile silos. And we all knew that if there was ever a nuclear exchange, Winnipeg, where I lived, would be gone because every 10th Russian missile would come short and land right on top of us. So we all knew the missile silos are in North Dakota. And then what happened in 75, they had 300 nuclear missile silos, which would have made them a nuclear superpower if they'd been a country. And then in 75, what happened is the Americans opened the first anti-ballistic missile unit that ever went operational in a town called Nakoma, North Dakota, which is just on the other side of the border from where all the UFO sightings took place. And they put another 100 nuclear missiles out in there, and it was the pre-Star Wars. So it was basically if the Russians launched a missile, they would have these big 5 megaton things they would launch nuclear missiles, and they would detonate it in space and try to stop these things as they're coming through space. And then if they had missed that, then they would have these 1 megaton sprint missiles, very fast missiles that would try to create shrapnel over top of the missile silo to sort of, rip up the missile as it was coming in. Because the whole thing was that when there's a nuclear exchange, it's not the cities that are going to get destroyed first, it's the nuclear missile silos. Because if you don't take out the other guy's nuclear missile silos, you're not going to know what happens after that. So the nuclear missile silos were the key thing that they were interested in. They put them in February 1975, which is exactly when the sighting started, and they made an agreement with the Russians in November of 1975 to take them out. That's exactly when the whole thing stopped. And to put a sort of a period on that, in November of 1975 was when Travis Walton was abducted. And one of the things I picked up that nobody ever picked up was the fact that Travis was gone 5 nights, and every single night he was gone, there was a nuclear missile, there was a UFO over a nuclear missile silo or a weapon storage area in the United States. And most people don't know that. So 75, at the end of 75, it was very, very heavy UFO sightings. That's when all these bases, Loring Air Force Base, Wordsworth, Minot in North Dakota, and Malmstrom are all visited by UFOs around the time that Travis Walton was taken in November of 1975. So you get all these sort of things that all sort of tie together that indicate the missile silos probably had a lot to do with the fact that the UFOs were coming on our side of the border.
A lot of these sightings take place around the silos, even in other countries. Do you think they're nursemaiding us or keeping an eye on us to make sure we don't overdo it?
Yeah, I think they're basically what the Canadians were told. When I first did my investigation, and I wanted to find out the question, like, why, what's going on here? What is this all about? So I studied what the Canadian government had done in the early 1950s. They had a project that ran from 1950 to 1954. And there was a story told to me by Walt Andrews, who was the head of MUFON at the time. This is back in 1978, I believe he told me the story. He said that Wilbur Smith, who ran the Canadian government program, had told him that he was in contact with an alien by the name of Alpha. I knew that part of the story. And that Alpha had said, if we will not step in, we will not interfere with the what the population of the world is doing. That we can't do that. The only time we'll ever step in is if there's a nuclear exchange, and we will step in and we will stop a nuclear exchange. And to prove that we can do it, we can take the moon in front of the entire world, split it in half, and put it back together to prove that we can stop a nuclear exchange. Other than that, we will allow the human race to stew in its own juices.
What first led you to investigate the connections between UFOs and U.S. presidents?
This was again this determination that I was going to solve this. It was a chess game, and I believed that I could figure this thing out, that I could follow the path. So I went to the Canadian government first, and then what happened was the Canadian government wrote a top secret memo in November of 1950, which is still in the archives. The Canadian government doesn't deny this memo exists. And in the memo, Wilbur Smith had gone to the United States, and he was a very senior guy in the government. He was the top radio engineer and in charge of all the radio frequencies, including the CIA, all the frequencies for intelligence. And he'd gone to the United States. He was interested in the UFO phenomena, and he said he had asked among the military people in Washington, the weapons people, and they had given him a bunch of material. So he returned to Ottawa and he wrote what's called the top secret memo. And in the top secret memo, it says, we were told by American officials, so not people on the street, American officials, that flying saucers exist. It's the most highly classified subject in the United States. There's a small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush trying to figure this thing out. And this subject is of tremendous significance to the Americans. And the thing that mental phenomena may be involved, that he was told by American officials, mental phenomena may be involved with UFOs. The Americans are doing very well because they said if we're working on the project, they're willing to exchange credentials and talk to us. So, of course, I was studying Wilbur Smith, but I was trying to figure out where did he get that material from the top secret memo? Who had he talked to in the United States? And it turned out he had talked to a guy by the name of Dr. Dr. Robert Sarbacher, and this all took place at the Canadian Embassy. I managed to recover some of the documents from there, and it all led there to Sarbacher identifying people who had been at a crash recovery meeting at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in 1950. They'd called in a bunch of scientists and engineers to brief them on what they had discovered, I guess, with the crash with Roswell, and that although the name Roswell wasn't mentioned. And he said that he couldn't go, but he said a guy by Dr. Eric Walker had gone. And Walker was a very senior guy. He was a co-developer of the homing torpedo, had 14 honorary doctorate degrees, was the chairman of the board of the Institute for Defense Analysis, top military think tank. He was president of Penn State University for 15 years. And so that all led to Walker. And for about 8 years, I led a team that grilled Walker, tried to get him to talk by letters and by phone calls and stuff like that. We wrote a book called UFOs, Area 51 and Government Informants, which gave the whole transcript of what Walker had told us. And he knew that we were working on this thing, and he had a file on us, and we were trying to figure out where this file was. And then we were trying to find his government files. So he was assistant head of weapons for the Americans in 1950. So we were trying to find this file. And he mentioned the fact in some of his documents, when I reviewed his documents, that he was going to leave some of his papers at the Truman Library. So I went to the Truman Library to find Walker's files, and there was really nothing there. There was a couple of letters, but really nothing significant. And it was that point I said to myself, well, the president's the most powerful guy in the world. He's got to know what's going on. So I talked to the archivists. They have these archivists who know everything. And I said, so what do you got on UFOs? And he said, well, we got like 20 telegrams that were sent to Truman in 1950 when there was the overflight of Washington, D.C. And Truman had put a shoot down order. He wanted them shot down, and it was all over the newspapers. And so all these people were sending telegrams to the White House saying, please, Mr. President, don't shoot him down. And so these were there, and there was a couple other little letters from contactees to the president and stuff, and really nothing significant. And I thought, that's it? That's all you got on this thing? The president's got to know everything. And so then I went to the Eisenhower Library, which is just down the road from the Truman Library in Abilene, Kansas. And I went there, and that's when I asked them, I said, what do you got on UFOs? And they said, we got 5 documents. They showed me the 5 documents. And I said, that's it? And I said, how many pages of documents have you got in the library? And they said 28 million pages. And I went, only 5 documents? So I started going from library to library and saying, something's wrong here. Something's missing here. The president's got to know what's going on. So I basically went to all the libraries to try to figure out what the presidents knew, who had sightings, was there any documents on it? And basically what it came down to is it's a very highly classified program. And the president nobody really knows what's going on. They know that UFOs exist. They know they've got bodies and crafts, but beyond that, they don't know. They don't know if it's extraterrestrial. They don't know anything. Even to today, they really don't know. So the presidents, it's sort of a thing that they keep away from the president. He gives them plausible deniability. He may know a little bit about it, but they basically tell him, this will protect you. Just basically don't ask questions. We've got a program. We're working on it. We're trying to figure it out. We can't figure it out. So that's basically where that came. And that's when I got the download. So I was working on the presidents for maybe 30 years, wasn't really getting anywhere. I had a lot of interesting stories, but didn't really get anywhere. And that's when I had the download in 2012, which basically 3 things were put in my head at the same time, which basically the sum story was, it said, this thing has got to do with consciousness. That's what it's all about. You asked that question, what's going on here? What is this? And they said it's got to do with consciousness. And came with absolute certainty. My head was spinning. I just went, wow. And I started the whole search of people who'd flown the craft using mental telepathy, their brain or their consciousness, and channelers and experiencers. I moved from trying to chase lights in the sky to talking to people who had actually interacted with the intelligence to ask, what did they tell you? What happened on the ship? Like, what was the message? What are they saying? All this kind of stuff about, consciousness and stuff like that. And that's when things started to unfold for me, and everything started to make sense in 2012. So 2012 till now, that's what I basically worked on, is not UFO sightings, but the whole contactee experiencer thing. And what are these people being told, and why why are they doing these bizarre things all over the place, which is, they're not only doing bizarre things, they're actually crashing, I believe, on purpose. They're dropping stuff like pieces of metal, which doesn't make any sense. If you came from 1,000 light years away, why would you just have little pieces start to fall off the flying saucer? And it was clear they're dropping this stuff. They're dropping it on purpose. And even Bob Bigelow, when he was asked about it, the billionaire who was the contractor for the big UFO program, they asked him and they said, have the Russians got a craft? And he said, yeah, we got a craft. The Russians got a craft. The Chinese have a craft. There's probably one in South America. They're seeding them all over the place. And that's this whole idea of the gifting field, that they're actually gifting this stuff. And it doesn't give you propulsion because the whole key to the thing, the propulsion is that unless you understand consciousness, you can't turn the craft on. The craft is run by consciousness. That's the interface that makes this thing go. And now you'll see stuff like now you'll see a lot of stuff about psionics and flying crafts with minds. Well, I had that long before they ever came out with it. But that's where everybody's going. We're starting to move towards the idea you got to put this consciousness thing together to understand what's going on.
When you were researching the presidents, was there any one president that stood out to you the most?
Well, there was a couple that were really into it. Reagan was into it, Carter was into it, and Barack Obama was into it. So some of the best stories, I guess, come out of the Reagan administration, where, for example, now we have this new movie by Steven Spielberg that has just been released. Well, Steven Spielberg released Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which is actually based on a real event. And then he released E.T., which came out during the Reagan administration. And Steven Spielberg tells the story on tape. We've actually got the audio of it, where he said that he showed E.T. to the president, and that the president stood up in front of everybody. He said, "Thank you, Mr. Spielberg, for bringing E.T. to the White House. We really enjoyed it, and I just want to let you know, I bet you there aren't 6 people in this room who know how true this whole thing is." And of course, I went and I found out who had been in the room. That didn't really help me, but the 39 people in the room at the time when this screening was done. He did that one, and the other one was the alien invasion remark, which I started putting out. It was picked up, and now it's pretty famous, this alien invasion remark. And I remember the synchronicity of being at the library one time that just sort of leaves you shivers. I was there, and I was about 5 minutes before closing time, and they have a file because these letters are worth a lot of money if they have a presidential signature on them. So they photocopy everything, and you look at photocopies rather than real documents. And they had a whole collection of Reagan stuff. And so I was looking through it and I said, "Is this Reagan's writing?" And she said, "No, no, that's not Reagan's writing. This is Reagan's writing." She turned to a part of the binder, and here was Ronald Reagan's handwriting saying, I've often wondered if there was alien beings from another planet, whether, we would all come together. And it was actually the alien invasion remark, and it was his actual handwriting. And he said, "Could you please put it back into the speech?" So it was in the UN speech, and they had pulled it out because they didn't want him to sound like he's crazy. And he actually asked, and they had to put it back in the speech. So those were the kind of things that got me. Or when I was at the Carter Library, one of the archivists, people don't realize that the archivists at the library, they're not trying to cover up anything. They have rules that they got to follow. But a lot of these people are just really interested in history. And the guy that was at the Carter Library actually went to school with Chip Carter, Jimmy Carter's son. And he said, I remember him telling this story. And he said he told a story that Jimmy saw the UFO in 67. So the story always was 69. He said it wasn't 69. He said because I was going to school with Chip Carter, and had to be 67. So I remember with him, he was so interested in the subject that it was after hours, and we sat there for about an hour and a half after the archive is closed, talking about UFOs. So you do find some people in the archives who are very interested to help you try to find stuff inside the library.
How serious did Carter pursue the UFO issue after entering the White House?
Well, he was very serious about it, but again, it came down to the idea that the president. That you got to always remember this fact: do they know the story or do they not know the story? And I say that they don't know the story. They know that UFOs exist and that we have crafts, but they don't know, as Jim Semivan from CIA said, just because you got bodies and crafts doesn't mean you know what you're dealing with. So Carter was very interested in the thing, but the answer they would give him is, yes, Mr. Carter, there are UFOs, but we haven't figured it out. And that's what Jimmy Carter said when he was asked by James Fox. James Fox confronted him at a book signing, and he said, "Why didn't you do anything when you were the president?" And Carter said, "There are many possibilities, but nobody has answers." That is the bottom line. But Carter was very interested. So what the thing was that he didn't have his fingerprints on it. So what he would do is he would put other people to do his dirty work for him. So he had press secretary would go. He was going to the FBI, and the FBI ended up releasing 1,500 pages of documents. He sent his science advisor to NASA to start a new UFO investigation, another blue book. And of course, NASA said, "You cut our budget. We haven't got money to do this." And it was the old idea. They had gotten a memo from the CIA saying, "Don't dare touch this thing." And it was a PR nightmare. So they said, "No, we don't, we've got no money to do another study. But if you have metal that you've recovered metal, we're willing to investigate that, but we don't have money to run another study." So he had those people. He had an ET study that was shut down by the Congress that went to SRI and said, "If you run this ET study on ET intelligence, we will cut all your budget. We will cut all the stuff that you have with the Pentagon." So they backed out of that. Then they had a lawyer that was at the CIA, and the CIA was hiding all the documents. Apparently, there was 14,000 documents, and they only found 1,000. And the story was that the lawyer, who was a female, was so frustrated by them hiding documents that she broke down crying in the CIA. So he had all these other people doing all this kind of stuff, and so you do see like the vast majority of documents. At one point, it was half. I don't know if it's half now, but half of all UFO documents that we have on file were under the Carter administration because he was forcing out all these documents, and yet he himself, it made it look like he didn't know what was going on and he wasn't involved. But yes, he had people doing all this stuff for him.
George Bush came directly from the intelligence community. How significant is that with the connection of UFO secrecy?
Yeah, again, he was sort of cut out of the loop. If you listen to um, oh, now his name's going to escape me. Eric Davis. Eric Davis tells the story, and I knew this because he told me this story 20 years ago. He talked to both President Bush and to President Carter. And what we were trying to do is we were trying to track down NIDS, who's the big group that was working in the early 2000s. Big Bob Bigelow had hired all the top people to work on this, try to solve the problem. And Eric Davis had done a project for them where he went because Bush had an intelligence background. So Eric Davis had an intelligence background. They both belonged to the Organization of Former Intelligence Agents. So he had his phone number. And I remember him phoning me and he said, "We got Jimmy Carter's phone number." And I said, "No, I don't got Jimmy Carter's phone number. I'm a Canadian. Why would I have a Jimmy Carter's phone number?" And I said, "Why do you want Jimmy Carter's phone number?" He said, "Well, I'm going to talk to him about the Holloman Air Force Base film." Now, the Holloman Air Force Base film was a story that was given to producers in 1974 to put in a documentary in 1975. And just before they were to release it, the Pentagon said, "We can't give you the film. You can't have it. You have to bring it back to the Pentagon." It was moved back, and you got to storyboard the thing. You got to sort of make up a thing that tells the story. So in the documentary, it says this may have happened, or it may happen in the future. And it was a story about Holloman Air Force Base in May of 1971, where three UFOs come over the base. And they have generals that have been flown in from Washington. They know this thing is going to land. They have cameras set up. They have all these people watching, and this thing lands at 6 o'clock in the morning. There's two UFOs move away, and the one lands. The door opens up. The alien beings come out. They shake hands with these officials. They put the UFO in a hangar, and this apparently was filmed. So apparently it was shown to presidents during their briefing. Like Jimmy Carter, there's a story that Jimmy Carter was shown this 15-minute color film. He broke down crying. You hear all these rumored stories. But Bush was talked to by Eric Davis. So Eric Davis phoned up first. He phoned up President Ford, and he also had an intelligence background. So he said, "Did you see the Holloman Air Force Base film when you were briefed as president?" He said, "Yes, I saw it." So Eric Davis says to him, "So when was the briefing?" He said, "I'm never going to tell you when the briefing is. Don't even go there." And so that's about as far as he got with Ford. So then he went to Bush and he said, "Did you see the film?" And he said, "Yes, I saw it, but I didn't see it as when I was briefed as president. I saw it when I was the CI director." But he was only CI director for 1 year. People forget that. He was only CI director for 1 year. But he said the guy came in, like it's kind of an interesting story. He said the guy came in to brief him as CI director, and he starts telling him this story about this landing at Holloman Air Force Base, where these aliens come out of the craft and stuff. And Bush is saying, you're telling me what?" And then suddenly this guy realized, holy cow, he hasn't been briefed on this. We don't know if he should be briefed on this. And he said that's when he learned about it, that he actually got it by accident, that they briefed him figuring that he already knew about the story. And so Eric Davis had a couple of phone conversations with Bush, and Bush said it was real. It happened because there's all these questions. Was it a counterintelligence operation? Was it a propaganda film? Was it a training film? Was it an A-12 flaming out? What was on the actual film? And he said, no, 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 it wasn't that. It was the real deal, and it had massive security surrounding the project. So that basically confirmed it. And I asked the producer. I went to the producer and I said to him, I said, "Bob, this is kind of weird, you know. You got the Holloman Air Force Base, you know, except for the location and the time of day. This sounds exactly like Close Encounters of the Third Kind." And he said, "What? I didn't tell you?" And I said, "No, you didn't tell me what?" He said, "I didn't tell you I gave a copy to Steven Spielberg." I said, "No, you didn't tell me that." And so he gave him a copy of the documentary in 1975. And in 1977, Steven Spielberg has exactly the same story. Three UFOs come in, they're waiting for it, they got the cameras rolling, and the two fly away, the one lands, the beings come out. That's the Holloman Air Force Base film. And so he said, "I told you, Annie Spielberg worked as a line producer for Alan Sandler, who owned who's his partner. She was a line producer for us, and that she said Steven wanted a copy of the documentary, so they gave a copy to Steven Spielberg, and then two years later, suddenly this story comes out in Close Encounters of the Third Kind." And Bob told me the story that Steven Spielberg's mother had come to him after Close Encounters of the Third Kind had screened, and she said, "Bob, I've seen your version of the landing, and I've seen Steven's version of the landing, and I like Steven's version better."
In your opinion, have all the presidents been fully briefed, or are there some presidents that you think have been denied access?
Well, that's the story. I don't think, I mean, I think it's partly the problem that if the president does want to know about it, like for example, Donald Trump doesn't want to know about it. He has no interest. He doesn't believe it. He even talked about the fact that he got the briefing where they brought in the Nimitz pilots. And he said, "Oh, they really cool guys. And they were like, I was really proud of these guys came in. They told me the story. And I don't know. I still don't believe it." So he got the briefing, the briefing that, yeah, they had this thing at Nimitz and all these things happen, all this sort of stuff, but he still didn't believe it. And the same when he was releasing these documents, the ones that are making the big headway now, you know, 1 in a billion half hits. He now realizes this is, you know, a lot of people watching, that he's going to get votes out of this thing. But still, if you take a look at what he says, you know, a lot of people are interested in fact, there was one guy that wrote 4 books, and his names are going to escape me. Wrote 4 books on Trump, and he said that Trump had told him in 2016. He said, I could run on UFOs. People really believe this," and then he swore, "People really believe this," and you know, this crap, he in this last thing where he said, "People are really interested in this, so we're going to release this stuff. We're going to release all the UFO documents. You tell me what you think. I don't know." Because it doesn't involve money, it doesn't involve real estate, and he doesn't. It's like you know, you see a UFO, and then you tell your wife, and she tells you you're going to get locked up. And most people just don't believe it. They don't really care. They don't believe it, and so Trump is one like that. So they're not really going to tell him. Plus, when it comes to briefings, people tell the story that if you get a bunch of generals come in with Trump, and they start giving him a briefing. If it's a PowerPoint, he's gone in 90 seconds. He's not going to sit through a PowerPoint. He knows more about everything than anybody. And so some of the presidents will stay away from the subject. They'll just get what they need to know, and they know it's top secret. But you got to realize that the situation with the UFO situation that people don't maybe realize is that the all security clearances come from the office of the president of the United States. So you can say, well, the president doesn't even need to know. There's some guy with a higher security clearance. The president doesn't have a security clearance. He can get whatever he wants. And the statement is, if the president wants something, we will move mountains to make sure the president gets it. He gets whatever he wants because he can just fire everybody, as you can see with Trump. You can fire people and keep going down the road until you get somebody who actually tells you the truth. So it's just that he's not interested in it. But some of them, they know that they're told sort of stay away from it. But the program is actually an executive program. And Jim Semivan points that out. He states that the UFO program was built under what's called a PED, a Presidential Emergency Action Document. It was started by Eisenhower, wrote the first one on UFOs, and it basically says we don't have to tell Congress. We can put in 5 people that know the subject. Nobody else knows about it. I want this person, this person, this person on the program, and it's called a PED, which it also covers things like the presidential security around the president. It also includes the nuclear plans for what happens if there's a nuclear attack. This comes under the same category as those things, very, very highly classified that aren't known about Congress. So that's the problem with Congress, that Congress thinks that because they're paying for it, that they should get the answer. But if it's a PED, they're not going to touch it because you need the security clearance. So you need that security clearance in order to be given access, to be given a briefing. And then the problem is even if you get the briefing, if you're a congressman and they take you into a skiff and give you the briefing, you sign your life away before you go in the briefing, which means you walk into the briefing. Now they've got you. You can't talk about it. And so there's this thing that it's under 7 layers of security. It's so deeply buried, as somebody said. Who was it? Ben Rich said, he ran Lockheed Skunkworks. He said it's so deeply buried it would take an act of God to get it out in front of Congress. And that's the whole deal. It's the most highly classified secret. That was what the Canadians were told in 1950. It's the most highly classified secret in the United States. But if you take a look at what they actually know, always comes down to this thing. What do they really know? Jim Semivan, who and I don't know if you know the story, Jim Semivan was the head of covert ops for the CIA. He had the beings in his room in the early 1990s. So, of course, he's like me. He wants to figure this thing out. I want to know what's going on. He asked the CIA. They said, you need higher security clearance. So he gets the highest security clearance in order to get the briefing. He said, the CIA says, okay, get a room inside of the CIA for 6 to 8 hours. He goes into this room and he said, these guys, they're contractors and they're very high science people. They have as many tickets as I had, and I had all the tickets. They come in, these very high guys, and he said they scared the living daylights out of me. For 7 hours, I sat there and listened to them. And they asked him, they said, well, what did you learn? Well, what do they know about UFOs? And he said, nothing. They don't know anything. And he said, I will bet a year of my pension that against anybody who wants to take me on, that they have no idea what's going on. They have bodies and crafts. Yeah, they have this, but they have no idea what's going on. And he said, and then the guy asked him in the interview, said, well, what do they know? And he said, all the psi stuff is right. Everything about psi, psychic phenomena, telepathy, remote viewing, it's all right. And that's what they're working on, this psi thing. And there's even a story now put out that this Spielberg movie is a sort of a cover to scare people away from the psi. The psi is the basis of the program. That people want to, if you can talk in somebody's head, you can go talk to Putin or to Xi or to any of these leaders, and you can talk in their heads. That's what it's about. It's this high level security that they're working on this. They're trying to figure out this consciousness thing. How does this thing work? There's even a thing where back in the when I was writing a book on Apports, where they're dropping things. Like it happens in all sorts of paranormal phenomena where things will fall out of the ceiling and stuff like that, and they're called Apports. And a lot of it happens in UFOs. And I was working on this whole thing, and it came to the UFO thing, and it was happening there as well. But when it came down to it, what they really knew was was really nothing except in a DIA document in 1972, I think it was. I put it in the book. It talked about apports. So the apport is to make something appear or disappear in a spot. So they said if we could figure out the secret of apports, we could go to the Russians. We could go into a Russian vault. We could get the documents. We could take them out. We could take them to Washington. We could photocopy the documents and return them to the vault, and they would never even know we were there. And that's this whole thing, is to make the documents appear and then put them back in this vault and make them disappear. So that's what they're working on, this whole thing. If they're watching this paranormal phenomena, which they're doing at Skinwalker Ranch, you see all this kind of stuff. And that's what Skinwalker Ranch, people misunderstand. It was not a UFO program. It was a paranormal program. They were looking at, dino beavers and portals and mutilated cattle. There was no UFOs. There was all this weird stuff. And they said, if we could figure out how all this weird stuff works, then this would be to our military advantage. The intelligence community would want that. And that's the last thing they're going to give up. So they would basically tell the president, you don't need to know about this kind of stuff. It's true. Or they would tell him, and then he has to deny that he's ever been briefed on it and stuff like that, because the president is running the program. It's an executive officer program. It is not a program that is run by Congress. It's run out of the White House, and therefore all the documents are there and all the contractor stuff is there. And it doesn't make any sense to me that the president wouldn't know, because it's very clear. The rule is very clear. If the president wants to know, he can get it anytime he wants. He can declassify whatever he wants. He can take all the UFO secrets and declassify it. But what I always point out to people, because I did the president stuff, there have been 14 or 15 administrations that have handled the UFO subject. Half Democrats, half Republicans, 7 and 7. And every single administration has done exactly the same thing, which indicates the people at the top of the pyramid that are running the program, whether right or wrong, they all believe they're saving the country. They all believe that this has to be kept away from everybody, that it's that top secret. So it's not a political thing, one party versus another party. It's got to do with all the people, that nobody has defected over all these years from the high level administration to tell the program, because it's that highly classified, and people at that level all believe that they're saving the world by keeping it secret.
We're about midway through. I'm going to run my break here, and we'll come back and we'll get into the discussion of disclosure.
Okay.
I was a highwayman, along the coach roads I did ride, with sword and pistol by my side. Many a young maid lost her baubles to my trade. Many a soldier shed his lifeblood on my blade. The bastards hung me in the spring of 25, but I am still alive. I was a sailor. I was born upon the tide.
This is Dark Spaces News. I'm Joshua Stark. Microsoft has said it made a major breakthrough in quantum computing with the development of its new Majorana 2 quantum chip. The device, the company claims, is dramatically more reliable than previous generations. The achievement was accelerated by Microsoft Discovery, an advanced AI research platform designed to help scientists solve complex problems faster. According to the company, the AI system analyzed years of experimental data, automated laboratory processes, detected manufacturing defects, and helped researchers identify new ways to improve quantum hardware. The result was a redesign of the chip's materials and architecture, leading to a significant increase in qubit stability. Qubits are the building blocks of quantum computers, but they are notoriously fragile and prone to errors. Microsoft says its latest design can maintain quantum states for far longer than before, representing a 1,000-fold improvement in reliability over earlier versions of the technology. The company believes the advance could dramatically shorten the timeline for building practical, fault-tolerant, quantum computers. Microsoft now says it expects to reach key milestones years sooner than previously anticipated, potentially bringing large-scale quantum computing closer to reality by the end of the decade. If successful, quantum computers could revolutionize fields ranging from medicine and material science to energy research and logistics. This is Dark Spaces News.
Looking for a portable radio that is slip into your pocket? Take a look at the CC Pocket AM/FM Nowhere Weather Radio Plus Alert with clock and sleep timer. We combine ease of use, very good reception, and sharp, well-defined audio together in this little jewel of a radio. You can listen on the built-in speaker or the included high-quality original CC Bud earphones tuned for superior voice quality and music. It has 5 one-touch memories, R-type buttons for each band, and stands upright when needed. To get your CC Pocket Radio, you can call 1-800-522-8863 or visit us on the web at ccrane.com. Once again, that's CCRANE.com.
NASA says it remains interested in extending the life of the Hubble Space Telescope through a mission that would raise or reboost its orbit, but only if the cost could be significantly reduced. Hubble has been operating since 1990 and continues to produce valuable scientific observations, but its orbit is gradually decaying due to atmospheric drag. A higher orbit would help the telescope remain operational for years longer and reduce the risk of an uncontrolled re-entry in the future. The idea gained attention in 2022 when NASA and SpaceX studied the possibility of using a commercial spacecraft to boost Hubble into a higher orbit. While the concept was found to be technically feasible, NASA has not committed to moving forward because of budget concerns. Catch up with us. I'll be lurking around the Midnight Frequency Discord group and their Facebook group. Catch up with me. Talk to me. Let's talk. This is a Dark Spaces editorial. The views expressed by the speaker are not necessarily the views of Dark Spaces News or its affiliates. First of all, I definitely want to say thank you to all the listeners who have reached out to me wondering what happened. I appreciate you so much. Sit back, relax, and enjoy your favorite tea. Early last year, I was approached to host this very news segment on podcasts and radios. I was very excited, so I agreed. Now, a year later, I make it mine. Now, that's not what this is about. I'm speaking today about the importance of mental health and seeking help when you need it. There was a member of my staff who, number one, took advantage of a legacy not theirs. Number two, had some uncomfortable dealings with persons of the opposite sex that I will not get into. And three, lied about multiple situations, including ownership of the very copyright that I was using. Needless to say, my staff and I have separated from them and will not be promoting any of their materials or brands. The surviving segments of the news program that I voiced and produced are my intellectual property for my use, as no agreement was signed. We hope this individual gets the help they so desperately need. Understand that this will be a safe space for those seeking refuge from individuals who manipulate, lie, and misrepresent themselves. We report only truthful and relevant news, which has been my credo since day one. I make this promise to you, dear listener, that we will continue this and bring you the best spooky adjacent news on the planet. Thank you. See you next time.
He came from somewhere back in her long ago. The sentimental fool don't see, trying hard to recreate what had yet to be created. Once in her life.
Want to take a journey into the unknown? From the Ozark foothills of Arkansas, this is Midnight Frequency Radio with Carl Richardson, exclusively on the Nightwatch Digital Network.
All right, we're back with our guest, Grant Cameron. Mr. Cameron, What would disclosure look like to you? Is it what's taking place now or not really?
Okay, this is where it gets kind of complex because everybody has a different idea of what they think is disclosure. So if you take a look at Jim Lukatsky was the guy that ran the OSAP program. That was the big UFO program for the Department of Defense Intelligence Agency. He wrote 4 books and he said, I have given you disclosure. So what he says in his disclosure is, yeah, UFOs are for real. Um, and he adds the fact that we have a craft. In book number 3, he said, we have a craft. I was at a congressional facility, which is important because people will say, oh, Congress isn't briefed. He says, I was in a congressional facility, which means Congress is briefed, and with a senator who would have been Senator Reed from Nevada. And he said, I let I'll give you a short point. All I can talk about is what I was allowed to put in the book. This is what I'm allowed to put in the book. The meeting was a long meeting. But the part I can tell you is I informed them that we had managed to breach a craft, get inside a craft. We have a craft. We've been inside the craft. So then he was asked by George Knapp and um, Jeremy Corbell, we were interviewing him. Well, what was inside the craft? And he said, I can't tell you that. I can only tell you what's in the book. The book. And so they said, you are saying that we've got a craft, officially saying that we've got a craft and we've been in it. And he said, yes, that's true. That's what I'm saying. And so then in his 4th book, then he actually identified what was in the craft. And what was in the craft was nothing. There was no panel boards, there was no engine, there was no fuel tank, there was no nothing. There was no beings, there was nothing. And that they had managed to breach the craft. So then they asked him, they said, okay, so how did you breach the craft? And he said, I can't tell you. Now there's a story. This is when it gets into this whole thing about how complex this whole thing gets once you get past the fact that we've got bodies and crafts. And the part they're trying to hide is this part that there's this control mechanism of consciousness. So the story that's put out that the links up to this is the way you get in the craft is you have to have the right vibration. Otherwise, the craft will not open the door. The craft is alive. It's conscious. I even wrote a book, which I'll send you. It's called UFO Sky Pilots. And in that book, I go through 36 people who claim that they have flown the craft. And I thought it was absolutely bizarre. When the first woman told me, I thought she was nuts. I was going to throw her out of the house. 2013, she told me the story after I notified people I was interested in consciousness, and they put me in contact with this woman. I couldn't figure out why. But the key was when she said she'd flown the craft, then I suddenly realized why they put me in contact with this woman. And she said she'd flown 3 different models. Then I started to get, now I've got a second book, which is maybe half done on the same thing, flying the craft, on more evidence of the fact that this is the key element. So it's this consciousness thing. So what you get with Lukatsky is saying, yes, we have bodies and crafts. Yes, we UFOs are real. And beyond that, we really don't know. But he says that the situation is that it's a paranormal mystery. It's not a UFO mystery. He says it quite clearly in the book. And this is what he calls disclosure. In the book, he says the umbrella is paranormal. UFOs is only under the umbrella. It's only part of the paranormal phenomena. And that's what makes sense if you take a look at why they were so interested in Skinwalker Ranch. Is because all these weird things were happening, all these paranormal things were happening, and there was almost no UFOs. There was the odd UFO, but it was this other thing. And he actually stated at one point, he said, I was talking to Senator Reed, and what we were going to do is Reed was going to increase the budget. The budget for 5 years was $22 million. Reed was going to increase the budget to 50 or 100, no, to 100 or $150 million. And he said, I'm not saying we wanted the Department of the Paranormal, but we weren't going to go chasing around the country looking at flittering UFOs, which basically means that if they had $150 million that they were to get as they got the program expanded, they weren't going to investigate UFOs. They were going to investigate the paranormal. So the paranormal is the umbrella, and the UFO disclosure thing. Basically, I think they've disclosed what they've got. They may have some sort of technology, but over and over again, I've heard no, they got nothing. They shut the program down because it has to do with this consciousness thing, and they can't figure out the consciousness thing. And the 99% of the UFO community still thinks it's nuts and bolts. So 99% of the UFO community hasn't even gone there. When you talk consciousness, they think you're crazy. But it's this idea that there's this consciousness interface, and that the crafts may actually be apports, that they're actually creating these things, and that the aliens are not even aliens. They're multidimensional, or they're coming from a different sort of a time and space, or they're coming from a higher vibrational thing. You'll always hear this thing that the grays, you can't be around grays for very long because they vibrate at a very high level. So it's this idea that they are just coming from, they're here and now. They're all here. Everything is here and now. There's no time and space, and it goes by vibration. So if you can vibrate, if you get to the vibrational level, you can move into their world. And that's why the whole thing is so weird, and why they don't want to disclose this. Because if you're the president of the United States, okay, so say okay, we know that we got UFOs. So they've said that numerous times. Yep, UFOs are real. We don't know what they are, or they'll say we have no proof of extraterrestrial technology. And the reason they say that is because they know it's not extraterrestrial. They have doubts it's extraterrestrial. So they keep saying. So at one point, someone said, can we change the statement from the White House to say non-human intelligence instead of extraterrestrial? And they said, absolutely not. So they will never use non-human intelligence. They always use, we got no proof of extraterrestrial, which is true. They're telling the truth. They don't have any proof because they don't believe it's extraterrestrial. They believe it's something else. It's some more complex scenario of multidimensionals or whatever it is. So they've disclosed UFOs exist. The bodies and crafts. Now that's going to be something, if they get enough pressure from Congress, they may actually go there, because Lukatsky has already gone there. And Lukatsky is saying, I can't talk anymore until I get it approved, which means there's somebody above him that's approving disclosure. And I've always said since 1990, when I wrote my first book, I've said there's a disclosure program going on here. They're dropping little tidbits. And what they'll do, like at Area 51, is they'll put somebody like Bob Lazar, who's seen as a crazy guy, and they'll put him on the base. They'll give him a bunch of documents, true documents, false documents, let him see the craft, and then let him go running around the world telling the story, because everybody's going to go, oh no, it's crazy. He's a crazy guy. He doesn't know. And that's what they do. They put these stories out, and they put disinformation around it, so you can't tell what's real and what's not real. So that's where we're at now. Whether they're going to actually, like White House, disclose that there's aliens, and there's not aliens, but there's crafts. That has officially been disclosed by James Lukatsky, who ran the program, and that's in the open. It's just not very public that he made this disclosure. But if it comes to alien bodies, that's going to be another thing. And the other reason they're not going to want to go any farther than that is because it's the 1,000,001 question problem. It's what's your definition of disclosure? Someone says, and I say, okay, they disclosed. They said there's bodies, there's crafts, there's UFOs. And then they go, well, what about where are they from? That's another question. How'd they get here? And then it's like this question, and they don't know the answer to it. So why would you open the door to having the president stand there and go, well, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that question, and do all these weird things that indicate that you don't have the power. You're supposed to be the president. You're supposed to be in charge of everything. But there's so many equated things in the puzzle that they can't figure out, and they don't want to go there. They don't want to start answering all these questions, because it just leads to the next question, and next question, and next question. And as you know, the press can put a lot of pressure on the White House, and you can have your whole administration go down because now you're a cover-up. So the situation is like, well, Trump's the disclosure president. But if suddenly they disclose and say, well, no, we can't talk about the what's beyond that, or we don't know, then everybody says, oh, Trump's covering up now. He was the disclosure guy. Now he's the cover-up guy, and you suddenly lose all your situation of having the power. And that's this whole thing about, what are you going to do with the disclosure? If you're the president, what do you want to do? Do you want to actually go down that road? And they've made the statement, no, they can't. So that's why they're doing the gradual disclosure. They're doing these things, putting the story out about the craft, where it won't open the door, that it's alive, it's conscious. They put out stories that the craft is on the outside is 30 feet across, inside is the size of a football stadium. They've had a bunch of these stories, high-level officials floating these stories. And everybody goes, well, I don't know if I believe that. And most of the stuff is true. It's just we can't confirm it. So they're disclosing little bits and pieces of it. But right now, I would say they're not going to go any farther than if they can help it. They're not going to go any farther than, yeah, they've got a craft. Yeah, UFOs exist. The alien thing is very difficult because that gets into are they extraterrestrials? And I'm with Jacques Vallée. I do not believe this is extraterrestrial. I believe this is some sort of paranormal, higher vibrating frequency that's here. That is used to be like in 1896. The UFOs were wooden ships with propellers and balloons and stuff like that. And then it became the Adamski crafts with the balls under it. Or before that was the green fireballs in the Adamski crafts. Then the Betty and Barney Hill crafts with the windows. Then the windows went away. There's no UFO reports with windows anymore. And then it was triangles. And then it was orbs. And it just keeps changing. And the phenomena is changing. It's morphing. It's changing things. As we develop, it changes the phenomena and it changes. So there's no longer crop circles, almost no crop circles. There's no cattle mutilations anymore. They just do this and then they do this and they do this. And all of it is this weird stuff. The UFO phenomena, whatever it is doing the disclosure. And the way it's doing the disclosure is this wow stuff. It does these really weird things where everybody goes, wow, how did they build this crop circle? How did they get this cow with no blood in it? How did they get the heart out of the cow without an incision? It's these weird things that they do because they want you to realize the world is not the way you think it is. It's this really weird world, and the government doesn't know it. The government hasn't figured it out. You may have some high-level intelligence officials that brief Jim Semivan that know that all the paranormal phenomena, the psi stuff is all right, and they're working on it. But they'll, according to Jim Semivan, they're briefing and they told him, no, we don't know anything about the UFO thing. We haven't figured out anything. And then he was actually asked. He said he was so disturbed by what they had told him about the paranormal stuff, the psi stuff, and they'd figured all this stuff out. They asked him, do you want another briefing? He said, no, I've seen enough. I don't need another briefing. And he turned down a second briefing.
I don't blame him. Do you believe in the craft that Bob Lazar spoke about?
That's a thing. Yes, I believe Bob Lazar was put on there to disclose what he had seen. Now, whether his impression of the craft, he said he believed it was mind controlled too, that it was flown with the mind and these gravity amplifiers. Now, whether that was true or not, where they put them, one thing people don't realize is there's a bunch of things that happen with Bob Lazar that actually people don't know about. For example, he was only on the base about 6 or 7 times. That's why he was taking John Lear and other people out to see the test. And the test is the giveaway. So okay, he said he's a guy who's only been on the base for 6 or 7 times. So the question is, why would they tell him when the test was? He doesn't need to know when the test was. It's a need to know program. They're telling him when the test is because they've got his phone tapped and they know he's talking to John Lear and they want the stuff to go to John Lear. So John Lear was his father invented the Lear jet.
Yeah.
And John Lear was as honest as the day is long, but he had the craziest ideas about underground bases and aliens killing people and don't go to them when you die, don't go to the light because the aliens are going to take your soul to the moon and just crazy stuff he believed. And that's what they wanted. They wanted Bob Lazar to tell all the stories that he was seeing to John Lear. John Lear would put it out and everybody'd say, John Lear, don't believe John Lear. He's nuts. I mean, don't believe that story. And the story would come out that they had crafts at Area 51. So yes, they had these crafts at Area 51 that they had recovered, but they hadn't figured out anything. Even Bob Lazar admits that. They hadn't figured out anything. And that the minute the Bob Lazar thing went south, because what happened was as long as John Lear was telling the story, John Lear told the story for about 5 months before it broke. And he was telling the story nobody believed. It was, John Lear. No. And what happened was that instead of Lazar telling the story and John Lear, what happened was George Knapp had been told the story and he didn't even touch the story. Then one night in May of 1989, they're missing a guest on his show, the evening news show, and they wanted a live guest. So he said, you got that guy up at Area 51. We're missing a guest at 6 o'clock. I get him. Let's get him. We want to put him on tonight. And then they put him in backlit. They put it on the camera. That's when it went viral. That's when the story went viral. And Japan was there. Every news agency was there because it was no longer Crazy John Lear telling the story. Now it's George Knapp, who's got 24, Emmys and Peabody Awards and this high level guy. And it went viral. And President Clinton actually had to go and grab all this land because what was happening was people were going up into the mountains to see the UFOs and they could see the base. And now you had this most top secret base in the United States. And these people have got binoculars and telescopes and they're watching everything that's going on at the base. So Clinton had to actually take land away to move them 11, instead of 11 miles from the base, they were 25 miles from the base and they couldn't see the base anymore. So it sort of went viral. And the other thing that sort of indicates that this was a setup, that they wanted him to tell the story, that's the way it sort of worked out. Nobody knows whether to believe the story about Area 51. So the story is out there. The story is that they got a craft, they got it, but you can't confirm whether it's real. And the thing that convinced me was in the end when he got caught, they got caught on showing the test. So they told him when the test was. Takes John Lear out there. Then they get caught by the camo dudes, and he gets brought to Indian Springs Air Force Base the next day, and they put a gun to his head and they said, "When we told you this was top secret, it didn't mean to bring your friends along and watch the test." And then what did they do? Did they arrest him? No. Did they choose? You got this under Trump, they got the one guy, he's facing 6 years in jail and $2.5 million fine for one count, not of releasing classified material, of having classified material, written classified material. This is the most dangerous thing you can do, is have classified material. So if he was releasing the most highly classified secret and showing people a top secret test, they didn't fire him. They didn't do anything. They just let him go home and said, "Oh, okay, your wife is fooling around on you, and we feel sorry for you." And so they didn't even pull a security clearance. And this indicates like this is a setup. They want him to go out and tell some more stories, and that's what they want. So they do this all the time with phony documents that are half true, half false. People jump all over it, and they control the story with disinformation. So they're basically telling you the story without spilling the milk. Because if the president stands up and tells the real story and says, "Okay, we got this," then it's all over. Then it's like field day of reporters. You're never going to drop they'll never listen to anything you want to talk about. All they're going to want to know about is UFOs, and you don't want to go there. So you have to do this thing that they did there was a report done by Rand Corporation in the early 60s, which talked about this, what if we discovered extraterrestrial life? And what the Rand Corporation said is what you got to do is if you discover that there is a civilization visiting us, what you have to do is gradually acclimatize the people to this thing. If you drop it on them, the whole civilization will fall apart. And so that's what they're doing. They're doing this gradual disclosure, little bits and pieces. Plus, you have people like Semivan who are very upset that he doesn't know the answer to his situation of the beings. Who are these beings in his room? And he's sort of fighting. So you have these people. But I really have questions about people who are coming out on whistleblowers, because the first question you got to ask them is, why are you not in jail? This is classified material. You're releasing classified material. I don't care if you think that the atomic bomb should be released. Who cares what you think? It's classified material. Your opinion has nothing to do with it. And it doesn't make any sense that these guys can rock around, which means to me that they're doing the true false thing, that they're telling you some true stuff, some false stuff. And you'll hear all the time, you'll hear whether it's Elizondo or any of these people, they'll ask them a question. "Oh, I can't talk about that. I haven't been cleared to talk about that," which means there's somebody above them giving them instructions as to what to say and what they can't say. Somebody's watching it, and they're gradually dropping these little bits of the story to gradually move it down the road. But the end story is, I really do not believe that they have a full understanding of what they're dealing with here. Just because you got a craft doesn't mean you know where it came from, unless you find like a driver's license in the pocket of the Zeta Reticuli guys that they came from Zeta Reticuli. Other than that, how would you know where they come from? It's this very bizarre thing and these things are being dropped, which people forget. I mean, it's not like they crashed. I fully believe there's a top black ops guy in NASA, is Tim Taylor, that you'll often hear his name thrown around. I actually met the guy, and Tim Taylor basically says, he calls it the gifting field, and he maintains that these things are being dropped on purpose to sort of move us a little bit. So you have a gradual disclosure going for the government, and the aliens who control us or whoever they are doing the same thing. They're doing this gradual disclosure. They're doing these weird things, these weird things of putting marks on people's body, which is just totally bizarre. And the one guy, he's out of Israel. His son's got the marks on his body, and he said to me, he wrote a book called One. The basic message is it's all one thing where everything's connected, everything's alive, everything's conscious, everything's one. That was the message. And he wrote the book, and his son had read the book. His son is now 20 years old. And he said he discovered his son's got these marks on his body, which we've seen on other experiencers. So it indicates that his son may be an experiencer as well. And he said to me, he said, what am I going to tell my son? He's read my book, but I don't know. I don't want to freak him out. I don't want to mention this mark on his body and stuff like that. What else should I tell him? I said, tell him one thing. Did they come 1,000 light years to put marks on the back of your son? No, this is a message. This is just basically a message that makes you go, what's going on here? Like, what's this? I wonder if I've been an experiencer. And they got everybody running around trying to figure out what's going on. And eventually, as we all work on it and we all try to figure this thing out, we get closer and closer to the sort of the answer. And we get, more developed in what we're thinking. And that's what they want us to do. They want us to figure it out for ourselves. That's what the AFA message was, the Canadians. We are, other than stopping a nuclear exchange, we're not allowed to interfere. We're going to allow the human race to stew in its own juices, but they're giving us these little breadcrumbs to try to move us along and get us to understand that the world is not the way you think it is. The world is made out of consciousness. There is no the physical world. Even if you look on AI, and look up what is primary. Is it fields or is it matter? Fields are primary before matter. Fields create matter. And then you get this whole thing about what actually happened in the creation. Are the fields consciousness field? Is it a consciousness field? And you see more and more all the time of experiencers being told and the quantum physics stuff that indicates consciousness is primary, matter is second. And these people are working in a field of consciousness. They live in a field of consciousness. They can slow their vibration, come into our world, do whatever they got to do, appear as a UFO, and then sort of disappear and go back into their world. And as my experiencer friend in Israel was told by his beings, he said, when we come into your world, we take on a body. We don't need to take on a body when we come into your world. You can do the same thing, you just don't know it. It's this idea that we think it's a physical world and we're tied into this physical world. And what the phenomena is telling us is no, the world is much more complex than what you think it is. And they're doing this awe and curiosity, because until there's awe and curiosity, there is no investigation. You're not going to investigate anything unless you're really curious. And what you do is if they do something where they put a mark on your body, you find a triangle on your arm, you're going to remember that for the rest of your life. You're going to tell everybody, I had a triangle on my arm. I have to figure out where it came from. It's the most bizarre thing. That's what they do. And because it makes you in awe and curiosity, and you start investigating. That's what they're trying to do, is get everybody to investigate and realize the world is not, you're no longer in Kansas anymore. This is the Wizard of Oz, the world. When you look at it, it just gets more complex and grander and more complex. And that's what they're trying to tell us, that you guys have no clue. And in fact, I was told that clearly. I was told, you think you know what's going on, you haven't got a clue what's going on. So that's what I was told 4 times at least.
The reason I brought up that craft of Bob Lazar is, if people have seen pictures, if they've seen the S4 Bob Lazar story, there are no control type devices inside that craft for flying it. So it would either have to be all consciousness, telepathy control, or it ain't moving.
Yeah. And that's what people describe inside the craft. Or the people that I had was really weird. They would be on the craft, and everybody touched something on the craft. So the craft is alive, the craft is conscious. So what they do, you touch something on the craft. So people would touch a beehive, they would touch the panel, they would touch the end of a seat, everything. And the weird thing was all 36 people touched something different. But that was the thing. They became one with the craft. And when they touched the craft, they became one with the craft. And then the beings would say, 2 of them, the people directly, this is a quote, what they were told. They said, okay, where would you like to go? Ron Johnson is a friend of mine. They said to Ron, Ron, where would you like to go? We'll go for a ride. He said, okay, I'd like to see the Milky Way from a distance, which would be like 60, 70,000 light years from here. They said, okay, Ron, it is within you. Go within yourself. When you can imagine it, then we'll go there. And he imagined it, and he said, instant, 1 second, it was just instantaneous, boom, like that. He was there. And that's what you see in near-death experience, near-death experience, especially in out-of-body experience, where people will have near-death experience or out-of-body experience, and they will think to go somewhere. I want, where's my mother? And they'll instantaneously be with their mother and stuff like that. There's instantaneous movement. And that's when you start to see the crossover that when you hear people see in like UFO experiences, when they get abducted, they say, I can see in 360 degrees. And I go, hey, that's exactly what near-death experience people say. That's what out-of-body experience people say. And so you start wondering, is this all the same thing? It's just they're coming, one is coming as an alien, one is coming as a, near-death experience, all this kind of stuff. And it's all the same thing. It's this, once you get into that frequency, the near-death experience thing, that's why you get UFO people, but there's all this debate about dead people on board the ship. Well, maybe instead of them recreating the dead people, maybe you're in the world of the dead people. And that's why they can bring your dead relative on board the UFO craft, because that's where it's happening. It's not happening on a physical level. It's happening at a higher vibratory level. And that's where the dead people live. Or Bashar, the famous channeler, says, we come to you in your dreams because now you're in our world. And this idea of vibration. It's not going out here, going places. The whole thing with the experiments from quantum physics, the idea that time and space may be an illusion. So if there's no time and space, how big is the universe? It may be a singularity here and now, and it's all here, and it's all, like a hologram, and we're all imagining it. We're all in this little tiny singularity. And that's where this disclosure problem comes in, is that if you got to start going down that road as the president of the United States, you just don't want to go there, because it's just, they have so many unanswered questions. Even if they do have, an alien and they know where it comes from, there's just so many unanswered questions that they just don't want to go there.
Well, I notice in a lot of people I've had on discussing out-of-body experiences too, that you have to reach a higher vibration to reach that state. So all this makes sense. It ties together. I know you need to get back to other things here this evening, but would you give your website and any information about books and stuff to our listeners before you need to go?
Okay. My website is presidentialufo.org. My email address for people who maybe have bodies or on marks on their body or have had direct contact with beings is White House UFO at gmail.com. And the books I'm about to release, I just released a book called The Big Game. We were going to call it the Super Bowl. It's a two-part book, and it basically goes through this whole thing. I called it originally called crossovers, and this is this whole thing where I suddenly started to realize that all sorts of like orbs happen in physical mediums. They happen in psychics. They happen in near-death experience. They happen in abduction cases with after they come back and stuff like that. And so these two books are on this crossovers to show that it may be all the same thing. That you start to see similarities between all these paranormal phenomena. And then I have a second music book. I'm very bizarre that I've no background in music, but I've done two books on paranormal experiences in music, where people get instantaneous songs, where all the famous songs came from, how many people downloaded songs, all the famous songs, just unbelievable how many came in dreams and in instantaneous and stuff like that, and people who could transcribe music from dead people, just all these bizarre stories I've done. So I got a music book coming out, and I have a book on a channeler from 1847, which is very interesting. His name was Anthony Davis, and I do that book, and I compare him to all the modern channelers. I take 39 of the main things that he said as his part of his teaching, is what he was told he was channeling, and I compare it to Bashar, to Seth, to Abraham, to Paul Selleck, to all the main channelers today, and basically 100%. So 175 years between these two, and they're all saying the same thing. So I've got that, and he's got the main points of like how the world works, that people ask them, and everybody's saying the same thing. And then I have what's the other book I got coming out? Anyway, I've got a few books. I just sort of get down these little rabbit holes, and I've got a second book on the flying the craft, which was it's pretty significant because now you got this Skywatcher group that former military people and stuff like that who now have got this psionics. They suddenly discovered psionics. Well, I was talking about it years before them, and I sort of thought, "Man, did they steal my book here? Like what?" And they're now claiming the government's got people who fly crafts and they can interact with the crafts, and it's the same thing. It's done through this consciousness interface thing where if you learn how it works, you can do this. But I've got all these the second book coming out on people like Whitley Strieber and his engagement with the craft, whether he flew the craft or not, and it's pretty interesting where you see everybody telling exactly the same story, 360-degree vision. The craft is alive, it's conscious. You can go anywhere you want instantaneously, and it gets it's for me. I'm starting to understand better. For until 2012, I was basically spinning my wheels. It was just like one story after another, and that's the sort of I warn people in ufology. That's just the sort of the story the thing you gotta avoid is telling stories about sightings because it's interesting if you haven't yet a UFO sighting, but basically we're still trying to prove UFOs exist, and we did that in 1947. So I have the advantage that I got to see 5 times up close in 75, 76. So there's no doubt in my mind what was going on. I got past that. Let's go skywatch. Let's see a UFO. It's like, this doesn't mean anything. It proves that UFOs exist. You got to get past UFOs exist and get to the thing is, why are they here? Who are they? What is the message? Why are they here now? And is anybody talking to them? And what are the people being told and stuff like that? So that's where I'm now. I've sort of shifted, but you see a lot of the community starting to shift. Even the people start talking about consciousness, and I can tell they haven't got a clue what they're talking about, but they now know this is a key word you got to use in the UFO field because the government is now talking about this consciousness thing, these Skywatcher people, and people realize it may be actually true that this thing is not as nuts and bolts as people think it is.
Well, you are welcome back. When your next books come out, we'll discuss it with the audience and fill them in on it so they can look them up.
Well, I do really appreciate your giving me the time to tell my stories one more time, and hopefully people learn something from it.
Well, thank you, sir. And I'll let you get on with your evening.
Okay.
I'm sure you need to get back to writing those books.
Yeah, thanks, Carl.
All right.
We'll talk to you again soon.
All righty. You have a good evening, sir.
Okay, you bet. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Join host Carl Richardson as he interviews top guests in various fields of study. Now, airing live every Saturday night from 9 to 11 Central Time and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern.
As we wrap up tonight's edition of Midnight Frequency Radio, I want to thank our guest, Grant Cameron, for sharing his decades of research into presidential UFO knowledge, government secrecy, disclosure, and the mysteries that continue to surround the UFO phenomenon. Whether these secrets are hidden in classified files or tied to something even deeper involving consciousness and our place in the universe, the search for answers continues. Next Saturday night on Midnight Frequency Radio, we'll welcome Samuel Chong to discuss the fascinating book, The Thayuba Prophecy by Michael Desmarquette. The book tells the extraordinary story of a journey to an advanced extraterrestrial world where profound lessons about humanity, spirituality, reincarnation, and our future were revealed. It's one of the most talked about content narratives ever published, and we'll explore its origins, its message, and why it continues to inspire readers around the world. That's next Saturday night, right here on Midnight Frequency Radio. Until next time, for the late Art Bell, Joshua Stark, and Evan Lewis, I'm Carl Richardson, and this has been Midnight Frequency Radio. Until next time, good night, everybody.